All right. So it is May 10th, 2024. If you're catching this on the replay, we are going to dive into all about the gut, not just gut health, but how it's connected to everything else, how it's really foundational to health and dysfunction. It is our Take Your Health Back Now podcast. If you are watching live, thank you for being here, and comments along the way are welcome. If you are catching the replay, make sure you subscribe and like and share. All right.
Hey, everyone. And this strange green hue that I have, we're just talking about that. It's not a filter. I'm not trying to look like I'm in a underwater something. It's just the weird lighting outside, I guess. So just wanted to say that. Anyway, so we want to do gut health this week because it really kind of goes a little deeper from our last week's podcast on inflammation. So we were talking about how inflammation really is the root cause of all chronic health issues, disease. But the root cause of inflammation is the health of your gut. So
Right.
It goes a little deeper. And this is why, again, we always talk about this, but it always bears repeating that there are a lot of products and different things that say they can heal your gut. That is not true. There may be some products and things that might be good, to help assist in that healing. Like we like bone broth in our program because it's very healing to the gut. There's
Right.
some different reasons of why it's good to do, but it is not going to heal your gut, alone. So
Right.
just keep that in mind that there's a lot of
Like supporting an actual lifestyle change overall. Just taking a product, go back and listen to our Magic Bullet podcast, is not going to give you any kind of long-term solution for any issue.
right. Or even the we've talked about treatments for relieving symptoms that occur from dysfunction in the gut. But again, it's not resolving anything. And you really, like, if you want your symptoms to truly go away and, resolve those symptoms and then restore your health so that you can prevent them from coming back, the only way to do that is to heal your gut holistically.
Right.
So we'll jump into that. So we said gut is your foundation of health. So on the other side of that, that means dysfunction of your gut is the foundation of all disease. So just keep that in mind. And, the diseases that are associated with gut health are the same as we talked about last week with inflammation. So it's everything really. So it's autoimmune conditions, all cancers, chronic symptoms, mystery illnesses, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, allergies, asthma, anxiety, autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, fatty liver, IBS, Crohn's, obesity, rheumatoid arthritis. That was just my list I have. And that is like literally just a few that are caused by dysfunctional gut.
Yeah, that's a big misconception. I think for a lot of people, they hear gut health and they just think it's only issues really in the gut. So only things like, GI issues, IBS, ulcerative colitis. Like a lot of people think that's the scope of it, but it's not. Like it's really foundational to every system in your body. And, we've been talking about this for years, but there is even a lot of like research and papers, that kind of stuff, information coming out from conventional medicine now, tying these things together. So, if conventional medicine is talking about it, then there is like a huge connection there.
The thing with conventional medicine, even though there's a squirrel outside my window, just something. Anyway, with conventional medicine talking about it, they're still though going to treat the symptoms rather than the root cause. So just keep that in mind too.
Right. Just because they're talking about it doesn't mean they have a good solution.
Right.
It just shows you that this is now common knowledge.
Right. And it's kind of like we were talking about before too, with the not misinformation, but missing information, because you hear a lot of people talking about heal your gut, or, you know, leaky gut. Like, I think more and more people are starting to recognize those words or those terms. But the people talking about it, it got some good information, but not all the information. So it's missing information. But it is becoming commonplace enough that I think people recognize it usually. Okay, so your gut microbiome, and we've touched on this before, but it's made up of trillions of creatures, for lack of a better word. And you have to remember that, you know, I remember you talked about that. I can't remember which podcast it was, but we were talking about sanitizing and how they're trying to sanitize everything and kill everything, kill all the bacteria. Well, you are bacteria. You live with these trillions of bacteria, and they're not only bacteria, they're bacteria parasites that everyone's trying to get rid of, and viruses. So you've got this nice balance of trillions of them that you need to live, and you live with symbiotically. You know, you give them food and a place to live, and then they in turn give you services, you know, for all the systems of your body. So it's this back and forth. But if it's out of balance, then you're still giving them the food, but you're not getting the food. We'll go into that. And you know, that's when the things, it's just out of balance and you get infections and all kinds of things. But I heard a really good analogy. It's like imagine a native garden. So kind of like where I live here in the woods, there are all these plants that are coming up, which are so exciting. And they're all, you know, edible and medicinal, and they give you nutrients, and they've got healing properties. And so if you're in a native environment like that, you have everything you need. So that's kind of like your microbiome. But if it becomes out of balance, it's kind of like what we were talking about the other day with the soil is now bad, and there's no nutrients in the soil, and it's polluted, and now you've got weeds and, you know, invasive plants that come in, and
Or you wipe it all out and just plant grass.
right. And that's the other thing. So you either have a balanced microbiome, you have an imbalanced microbiome where you have infections and everything else, or you have no microbiome. You have it out, which is like what Jenny said. Those are the three things that can happen. And if you have a balance of these microbes, it's, you know, beneficial bacteria and beneficial parasites. And you've got to get that out of your mind, that you need to get rid of all the parasites. All these parasites cleanses always drive me crazy, because there are parasites in your body at all times that we need. We just don't want them to, you know, overgrow. And the parasitic parasites, or the parasitic bacteria, you don't want an overgrowth of those, because that's where disease sets in, if that makes sense. It's a lot. I also just wanted to say that to remember, and we have probably touched on this before, but remember that your microbiome, you inherit your microbiome from your mother. So, you know, when you're growing in the womb, you get her microbiome. And then when you are born, that adds to your microbiome. So whether, you know, if your mother was unhealthy, you got that start right off the bat. If you were born cesarean, you're born into a sterile environment. It doesn't add to your microbiome at all. It takes away. If it's a natural birth, then that adds to your microbiome. So all of those things come into play. And then the other thing to remember, you know, we talk about leaky gut. We'll talk about that, but all babies are born with leaky gut, so that they can build up natural immunities to proteins that come in. That's part of building your immune system. So again, if you are formula fed, now your body is building up these immunities, this protein, same protein it keeps seeing over and over, day in, day out. And now you've got an autoimmune reaction already right off the bat.
Right.
So let's play in.
Yeah, you're not getting that variety. And a lot of people don't understand that the gut is like one of those systems in the body that is changing so quickly. Like, you know, what is it, 3 days that everything kind of turns
If
over?
everything was in perfect balance and everything you were doing in your life was perfect, the cells of your gut lining turn over 3 days. Every 3 days,
Right.
you have new cells. They turn over faster than any other cell in your body.
Yes. So this is something you have to do consistently. I mean, think of those, 21-day gut detox. Every 3 days, the whole environment is changing. So it seems kind of crazy. A, that you would do something for 21 days aimed at that, and B, that you would stop after 21 days,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. And when you are doing all the right things, like for instance, somebody going through our program, your symptoms are gone or almost gone. And then you have this setback and all of a sudden they're back. And then, people are always like, what happened? But we've talked about that a million times. It can be one thing that comes in, one big stressor, you cheated on the food, whatever it is. And because those cells are constantly turning over, you can go from not having leaky gut to leaky gut, like almost immediately.
Right.
But that also shows you that you get back on, you do the right things, and you can heal that right back up very
Right.
quickly as well.
Right.
So,
And those are the cells. That's not the bacterial overgrowth. That takes more
right.
time to change depending on where you're at. Oh, my kitty. She's brought me a toy.
Right. So there's debate between whether dysbiosis, the infections come first, cause leaky gut, or the leaky gut comes first, causes dysbiosis. But we do know they affect each other, so it doesn't
Right.
really matter. But the leaky gut is when we're talking about the cells, because leaky gut is the cells pull apart, and then you can heal those up very quickly. So and they're also only one cell thick. So the gut microbiome interacts with all systems of your body. And again, we like to talk about that because there's a specialist for this and there's a specialist for this. That's a good one because there's a specialist, the GI specialist, and then there's an endocrine specialist, and then there's cardiologist specialist, and immunologist, and all these different things, and they're specialists, but they all interact. You've got to remember that our body is a whole and that everything affects everything else. So the GI tract affects all systems of the body. So we just kind of wanted to break those down and how that affects you and how that affects the symptoms that you are then experiencing. So clearly it affects the digestive health because the microbiome is in the digestive system itself. But like we said, what happens is you get leaky gut. So leaky gut is a word that I think a lot of people have heard, but that's what happens. It's kind of like a screen door. It's those cells get pulled apart.
Right.
And there's 3 different kinds of leaky gut, and that doesn't really matter. But it's like a screen door that has holes in it. So the bugs, imagine it's a hot July night and you've got your light on inside your porch. And so all the bugs are flying in through the holes. You've got mosquitoes coming in and,
Right. If you have a glass door, they can't come in at all. If you've got those real tight weave like this, then only some can come in. But as they, imagine the hole's getting bigger, like your cat scratches, you've got a big hole. Someone sticks their finger through it, then it's not as tightly woven and larger and more things can come through.
Right. So that's where you get the infections because the bugs come through the holes. You're getting bacteria and parasites and things out in the blood where it's not supposed to be. That barrier is to keep everything in the GI tract so it moves all the way through and out, your elimination process. But if you've got holes in it's leaky gut, then it's seeping out into the blood where it shouldn't be, which causes all kinds of problems there too. So it does affect your circulatory system as well. I didn't write that down, but it does. So when the toxins get in the blood, usually it's food proteins, but it can be toxins of other kinds. Then your body starts attacking them to get rid of them because it's your immune system's first response.
Right.
And then I would think if you've been listening to us, you're aware that that immune reaction, over and over and over, that's where your body, the immune system can't turn off, kind of like what we were talking about last week with the inflammation. It just is it's on all the time. And so it's reacting and then it starts attacking you, because say the wheat protein looks 80% similar to your thyroid protein. There's a very common link between thyroid and wheat and gluten. So that's just one reaction, but
Right.
that
And that's the most direct. That's happening right there in the gut because of what's going on in the gut.
right,
Just makes a lot of sense.
right. But other things that how it affects the digestive system. So you get dysbiosis, which that's the overgrowth of the parasitic bacteria, and then you get infections. So it could be like candida, or that's a common one that people recognize. Or there's so many different infections that you can get that cause so many different issues going on in the body. Um, and then nutritional deficiencies, you're always hearing about people had tests run and they're deficient in magnesium, they're deficient in, vitamin D or in B's or whatever. But the reason is because when you've got leaky gut and you've got dysbiosis, the bacteria are lined up along that path and they're going to eat anything like as you swallow and it goes down in your GI tract, they're going to eat all the nutrients before you do. And then you don't get any, you really don't get anything that's left over. And then another thing is most of your vitamin B's are made in your gut by your bacteria or a synthesis, it kind of works together process. So if you're deficient in vitamin B's, which you hear all the time people talking about, that's a gut issue. And then you've got the gut brain connection. So the GI tract and your nervous system are directly linked by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve controls the autonomic nervous system. There's another system. And your autonomic nervous system is your auto response. So it's, if you think about your body, think about, the body is so amazing. Think about how many things your body is doing nonstop all the time that you do not think about. You do not have to think about subconscious or consciously at all for your body to function. So
Yeah,
that's
funny. Think about the things you don't think about
right.
and that just happen. If you had to walk around thinking about, okay, heart, pump my blood, okay, lungs, breathe in the air, okay, brain, send this, electric signal to my hand so I can pick up this thing, you wouldn't be able to function like you're doing all those things. And then there's just reactions that people think more of like instinct. So, you hear something and you turn your head, or, something is a scary, like a car accident sound. You react to that without thinking about it.
Right.
That's controlled by all those. So then you can see how you get into like the anxiety and the depression and those types of things, because that is a, reaction that your nervous system is having that you're not thinking about it having.
Right. Or yeah, because the autonomic nervous system has two parts. So it's got the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So parasympathetic is where you are most of the time. We always say rest and digest, right? And then the sympathetic is that emergency response, like Jenny was saying. And if your immune system is on high alert all the time, then you're in that parasympathetic, or you're in that sympathetic state all the time, which we will talk about in a minute, because that's another system. It's crazy how involved it is, but it's more of the parts of your body that you don't think about. Think of all of your organs that just function without you having any input at all. Your liver is constantly working, your gallbladder, your pancreas, your stomach, like Jenny said, your lungs, your heart, all of those are working. So if you look at the vagus nerve, it goes from your gut all the way to your brain, and it affects all those organs all the way down. It controls them. So if you have dysfunction in your gut, there are actually more neurons in that nerve than even in your brain, and neurotransmitters and different things. So that is affecting everything all the way down. It's amazing.
It is. And I think that part of the reason why this is such like a big concept for people to wrap their brain around, like how could possibly your gut be involved in, an issue somewhere else in the body, is because first of all, most people don't even know what organs they have. If they can name all of the organs in their body, and this is not like to like make fun of anyone, it's just honest, like it's not something we're really, made to understand or told that is important. And if they do know all the organs in their body, they may not know what each of those organs even does for the body. There's a couple, of course, that people understand: your heart, your brain, your lungs. Um, those are pretty common, but you have so many other organs and how they work together, how they're even connected. Like the fact that that vagus nerve is what talks to everything and it's connected to your gut and your brain. I don't think that this is really put out there for people. So, how could you possibly understand that your gut health is affecting all these things? But it is so important.
Right. And I've heard recently, so, anytime anything gets popular, then things start getting skewed. So it's been out there enough that people hear about gut health. But now lately I've heard people saying, or practitioners saying, the gut health it's not true that gut health is the foundation of health. That's just one. So,
Right.
but it's not. This is just a good example of how it really affects everything in your body. It also affects breakdown of fats. So a lot of people aren't even able to utilize their fats. All of this stuff happens. And then everything that we just said, all of that causes inflammation.
Right.
All of those things, the leaky gut, the dysbiosis, infections, nutritional deficiencies, all of that causes the inflammation. So that's our entire last week's podcast.
Right. So if you didn't listen to that episode yet, you can really either order. So if you listen to this episode and then go back and listen to inflammation, it makes sense. Or if you listen to that and then this, it makes sense. You can see how things work in, they're cyclical or they work in tandem. Nothing is just by itself in your body.
Nothing is carbon. Nothing needs an expert. Unless it's an expert in holistic health.
Right.
Okay, so gut health also affects the nervous system. So you can see how that's kind of sliding into nervous system because we're talking about the vagus nerve and the gut brain connection. But yeah, like I said, the vagus nerve is the brain axis. So you can think of it like a highway, really. Like,
yeah.
It's an information superhighway between your gut and your brain. And so it's full of nerves and neurotransmitters and neurons. And it runs from the bottom of your GI tract all the way up into your brain.
Right. And then it's got like little side roads or exits for all of the organs.
Right. Yes. If you look at a chart.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And that's why a lot of people that have, say, frequent bladder infections, it's because of gut dysfunction, but it's because that vagus nerve there's a disruption in that superhighway, on the way down. Yeah. And then, so the gut is involved in neurological issues, behavioral issues, a lot of nerve pain issues people have, fibromyalgia, different things, mood disorders. We mentioned that you're constantly in fight or flight, but things like brain fog, memory, irritability, anger, anxiety, ADHD, autism, even things like peripheral neuropathy, that's really common where people get tingly numbness in their feet, maybe their hands, their extremities, ringing of the ears. What else? Lack of focus and motivation. That's a big one for people. They just memory issues, all kinds of things. But that's how the gut is, it's caused by the gut, but it becomes a neurological issue, if that makes sense. So that's another system, your nervous system. So then your other system is your immune system. So, you always hear about, it drives me crazy, take the vitamin D and the zinc and the whatever, and that will build your immune system. That is not true. Again, that's something that maybe can enhance your healing, or, your vitamin C or elderberry juice in the winter if you're getting a cold, something like that. But that does not build your immune system.
It enhances or supports what you're already doing. It does not build the system.
Right. So you don't want to wait until something happens. Like, you don't want to wait until flu season to start building your immune system. I mean, now's the time to build your immune system, truly. And you have to build your gut health. You have to heal your gut in order to do that. So your immune system, the microbes, the beneficial microbes, actually the parasitic microbes also, but they train your immune system, you know, to the responses it's going to have. And then I mentioned about the babies, but 80%, I think most people don't realize this, 80% of your immune system is in your gut.
Right.
So if you have gut dysfunction, an unhealthy gut, you have an unhealthy immune system. And on test results, we often see people that their immune response is just like sky high because it's constantly fighting everything. But then you also get people where your immune system is not even reacting at all, because it's basically losing the battle.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's a good tie into that first analogy we talked about with the forest. Either there's so much going on, it's clogged with weeds and invasive plants, and you can't even get through it because it's just growing like crazy, or it's just dead and nothing is there.
Right. Kind of like the fish tank analogy.
Yeah.
I always like to use, or the lake, a healthy ecosystem of water, you have healthy fish and frogs and turtles and water
bacteria and algae, it needs that.
Right. But it's all in balance. So then when you get these algae blooms that cut off all the oxygen, and then the fish die and there's pollution in the water, all of that, then you get very dirty, polluted water where nothing is
right.
Everything is sick. And then it gets to the point where everything is dead, like Jenny said.
Yeah. Or you put it through a reverse osmosis system and then there's nothing there, but it looks shiny and clean.
Good one too. Yes. So inflammation, if you listen to the last podcast, inflammation is caused, it's your immune system's first response. So a healthy immune system, you're going to have your quick response, like we were talking about, if you cut your finger or something like that, you have an immune system response, gets hot, throbs, but it's healing. Or you have a fever, it's healing, but then it can turn off. But if it can't turn off, your immune system constantly going, that's chronic inflammation. But that is your immune system's response. And that's how your immune system is lowered. Your immune response is high, your immune system is lowered. So keep that in mind. You have to build that up. And then the other thing with your immune system, like I said, with the leaky gut, your body starts mistaking things and it's on high alert all the time. And then it's attacking itself. And then you have an autoimmune response. That's what it means. Your body is attacking yourself. And that is
immune.
Right. Auto means, like think about autopilot. It just means it's going without you thinking about it.
Autonomic.
Autonomic nervous system. So anyway, not inflammation, your immune system for sure starts in the gut.
Yeah.
And we wanted to slide this in because we couldn't actually say it, or maybe we'd get taken off of YouTube.
We could say it, we just couldn't probably talk about it as an entire topic.
Podcast, but my phone's ringing. We just wanted to put this in here because that Plandemic Preparedness Treaty, we've talked about it for the last 3 years on Current Event Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to be voted on starting the week of May 27th. So that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And more than likely this time, they really will come to a vote.
Right, because they've done their revision period and when they put out for everyone to look at, and then they had to have so much time for everyone to read through it. So now we're at the phase where this is the finalizing and deciding whether to yes or no.
Yeah. And this is literally a crossroads in your life, everyone's lives, really. Because if it goes through, this is going to change everything to do with health freedom and body sovereignty and that kind of thing. So it's such a huge thing.
It is. It's like overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, but we saw a really good video or email yesterday where they just broke it down into 5 areas of your life it will affect if this goes through. And so one of them is the climate change and climate change pandemics. So, they've been talking about this wording all the time, and so that we're used to listening to it. But the other thing to think about is with the pandemics, they can call anything a pandemic. They can even say it is a pandemic before anything happens. It's pretty big with what they can do. And they're trying to do one health, like global health, so that they can say, this is what, we mandate this. And then everyone that is under that treaty that has signed it, all the nations, they're supposed to follow the mandates for that.
Right. It's like, we had arguments as a country with should it be at the community level, the city level, the state level. I meant county, not city, but community, county, state, or federal level for these kind of choices. And I think that the biggest consensus was that, as a country, we're so large, what's happening in one area is different than what's happening in another area. And what is the best response for that community is different because of their unique properties, who lives there, what they do, that kind of thing. Now, with this, we're moving from community level to global level. So, like, this one organization can say the entire globe, or everyone in the treaty, which is pretty much the entire globe, has to do this thing this way. Like, there's not even like country level changes.
Right.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, really. So if they want to mandate a vaccine, if they want to mandate that you can't travel on an airplane unless you have this, or whatever they want to mandate, think back to 4 years ago, they can do that, and they can really come down on you because it is this World Health Organization now treaty that everyone has signed in on.
Right.
Yeah, and then the other thing, it gives full protection to the companies that make these products, so they can't be liable for anything.
Right, which already in our country was true. So maybe not a huge change for us, but it's kind of crazy that they're getting global protection.
Yeah. And like with the COVID shot, that was emergency use authorized.
Right.
And it still is.
Yeah.
These years later. And so when it's emergency use authorization, they can just push it through real fast without, limited testing or no testing or, whatever.
Right. What that label means.
Right. But if this goes through, they can all be under emergency use authorization. Say that 10 times fast. And then they've got a bunch in there on combating misinformation. So that means anything that is real information, like what we talk about all the time, will be squashed.
Right. Like, that's really dangerous because there is no, Oxford definition on whose information is correct, especially with things that are new or emerging. Like, you can go back through the information that came out over the last 4 years, and what, even in the moment, people, no matter what side of this story you're on, in the moment, information was changing, especially at the beginning. And the people putting it out there were admitting it at that point. Like, we're unsure. So this is what we think. Oh, sorry, that was wrong. But now, if it's put into like rules and regulations, if you're that person that was like, hey, this isn't really what we think it was going to be, you can be like harshly, we'll say, reprimanded for that. And then how would we ever know that that information wasn't correct to begin with? Like, that's really dangerous censorship to regulate.
Right. Or even things like this podcast today.
Yeah.
If this goes through, they could say, all of these natural healing methods are false.
Right. Because they're unproven.
Right. They're pushing pharma. And so if anybody goes against that, then it's medical misinformation. So just keep all that in mind. So the whole thing is that it's really going to stomp out national sovereignty and health sovereignty. So my point is, well, first of all, you should be aware of it.
Right.
Because I mean, it's coming up really quickly. And there are states that there's 3 states that have signed at least a bill saying that they don't want to comply with this. And there were like 47 senators that wrote a letter. I mean, so at least people are standing up and people are talking about it, and more people are understanding. There's other countries that are talking about out, so who knows what's going to happen, but just be aware of it. And then the very best thing always to do is just take the precautionary principle, heal your gut, lower your inflammation, and be as healthy as you possibly can, so that's your very best armor against all of this, So we just wanted to slide that in there so you were aware, if you're still listening at this point.
Yeah. And we might put a couple of links because, like I said at the beginning, if you're in the private group watching this live, we've got like a chat set up now that sticks. So if you're in our private group, we'll put some links in there because those should be able to stick.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we talked about the GI system, the nervous system, the immune system, and then it also affects the endocrine system. So
and you threw in circulatory, even though we hadn't written that down.
Yeah, I hadn't written it down, but we threw that too. But the microbiome interacts with the endocrine system because it secretes, hormones and things like serotonin. I mean, there's so many different hormones, and then your hormones get out of balance. And then when you have these autoimmune responses to things, that also affects your hormones. So hormones are just crazy. And we always hear people, well, my hormones are off, as if it's something else, or, oh, my thyroid, or, infertility, or those type of things, but it all still relates back to the gut health. Right. Also blood sugar irregularities, it regulates hunger. So some people just don't get hungry. Some people are hungry all the time. That type of response, blood sugar really is a big issue. Regulates metabolism. Think about the people that can't lose weight, or that type of thing.
Or like the more acute things with blood sugar, where you feel like dizzy and nauseous, and
right,
like those are symptoms of that.
Right. So they're symptoms of the endocrine system being disrupted, but the endocrine system disruption ultimately came from the GI system, dysfunction, which caused inflammation. It's always a lot, but we just want you to, you really have to at least have a slight understanding of this so that you really are empowered.
This is what this I don't know, this is not a commercial or anything, but that's what this platform is for. When you're in our bodyburn bootcamp program, we know that maybe you just want the basic information and how does it get me to that transformation. And then this is where we can share all of this just a step further. If you're really interested in understanding and owning, your own health, then these are the things you need to know.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Some people, it's true. Some of the people that we work with, they're like, I don't care. I just tell me what to do. I want to get better. Just tell me what to do.
Yeah, and that's fine.
But other people are so interested in this and really like to understand and deep dive. So this is for you guys. Plus, we like to talk about it, and
Yeah, and we do throw in other things like, what we just talked about that people do need to know.
Exactly. Okay, so then what affects your microbiome? So we talked about what your microbiome affects, but what affects your microbiome? So that would be, we always talk about diet, lifestyle, and environment, the big ones, but
that's it.
Goodbye. We'll see you next week. Your diet, whatever you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're thinking, chemicals, stressors. Stressors are a big one.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot, but it really is. And remember, your body can't tell the difference between a physical stressor or an emotional stressor, or even a past stressor, like a traumatic event or past trauma, things like that. Then just over antibiotic use, sanitizer use, medications, heavy alcohol. There's so many things. Glyphosate is a big one that causes gut dysfunction. There's just so much that's coming in that's causing it. And again, it's one of those things, we don't know what's causing your personal gut dysfunction. It could be three of these.
Right. And it could be different today than it is in, next month.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, because it could be more of a physical stressor. It can also be physical. You're doing way too much exercise,
Right.
not getting sleep. Actually, your sleep is affected by that whole gut brain connection as well. A lot of people can't sleep. But anyway, all of these things coming in is what affects the microbiome. And then physical symptoms that you can look for are, do you bloat? When do you bloat? Do you bloat immediately after you eat? Does it take a little while? Are you constipated? Do you have diarrhea? Do you have both? Is it immediate? All of these things, the blood in
How
your
often
stool.
and regular are your bowel movements?
Right. And a lot of people say, I'm regular. I go to the bathroom once every 5 days, but that's not regular. So,
What is average for you? It is what is regular for a human body.
and then you can look for things like, are you seeing whole food particles in your stool? Is your stool well formed? I mean, there's so many clues that you can look for that give you an idea of what's going on. Poor digestion, just in general. And then a lot of people experience abdominal pain. Sometimes it radiates around to the back.
And
And
food cravings,
yeah,
those are a big one that people don't connect to that. They just think that's like a willpower thing.
right. Sugar,
Yeah.
anything sweet, people are really craving. That's a big one. Yeah, and it can be it doesn't have to be sugar. That just happens to be a big one. But these are signs of infections. You may have SIBO depending on when you bloat and how you bloat. IBS. That's when you come into the GI, what you normally would think of as a GI issue, like IBS, Crohn's. And again, remember, those are just, a diagnosis is just when you have enough symptoms that they can lump them together and give it a name. And then what to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're still with us on this episode, this is probably what you've been waiting for.
Right, exactly. So the what to do is, first of all, you have to heal the gut.
Yeah.
And healing the gut, there's a lot that goes into it. You have to take away the interferences. There's a lot goes into healing the gut. You have to settle down that inflammation, that immune response. Again, if you go through the program, we've got it all laid out, because that's what we do. That's the first part, is just really healing the gut. So you've got to look at all of those things, but then you also have to look in your life at what caused that in the first place, because you also have to eliminate that, as well as resolve the dysfunction. And again, it sounds kind of simple, but it's a lot. You have to look at a lot of different things, and just remember that no pill, no product is going to work for that.
Right. Not on its own. You have to make these changes, so even though we said your gut lining itself really quickly turns over, which means it can really quickly heal. If you heal it for a week, that's also very short term. You might feel better for a day or two, but it's going to come back very quickly as well. So it's kind of double-sided there. And outside of just those cells, that system, structurally itself, you've got all these imbalances in that bacteria that we've talked about several times. And depending on how long that's been going on, that can take a really long time to remove and rebalance, because once you get rid of that infection, you then need to rebuild the microbiome back into balance. So it's not just one step. You've got to look at all these things in what you're feeding. That bacterial infection is super important, what you're not feeding it, and what you're doing to support the healing structurally in those systems, and what you're doing on mindset, to reduce that stress and overall traumatic events that your body can't really tell the difference if that's physical or mental. So it is every single one of those things if you want long-term foundational gut health, positive gut health.
Right. And that just reminded me when you said that, a lot of people think that they can just take a probiotic, or
Right.
now the word prebiotic is becoming commonplace, but you've got to think about, so think about the number trillions, plural. I
Wow.
mean, you can't even wrap your mind around
No.
that, right? That's how many beneficial bacteria we should have. So taking a little probiotic of a few strains of bacteria is probably not going to really help you that much. First of all, most probiotics are dead. They're not even a live specimen by the time you get them. And you can actually add to that imbalance, that infection, if you're taking the wrong ones. So you don't really know. And, no matter what the probiotic is, you need ample, from many different places coming in all the time. That's why gardening's good, or, connecting with nature and getting your hands down in the dirt. That's where you really build
Right. And
probiotics.
once you have those bacteria in your gut, you want them to naturally flourish because then they'll keep themselves in balance. So constantly ingesting that bacteria is not going to keep that environment how it needs to be. Like you have to naturally feed and balance once they're there.
Right. And bacteria like to eat things like real whole food,
Mhm.
vegetables, fiber. So taking Mucilex is not gonna feed them. Or, you just need, if you eat a whole real food, whole food balanced diet, organic, because you don't want the pesticides on there either because they kill the bacteria. That will not only cause those bacteria to thrive, but they're thriving because they're growing in a balanced abundance, but also feeds them
Right.
so they can help your systems of your body. And also remember, once you get, chronic is long term, right? So years and years, like Jenny said, and you see how it affects all systems of your body. So once you take away the interference, you're healing that gut. You have to give it time. You have to be patient. That's the other piece, because
And if you have a plan or you're working with a practitioner, using supplements to kind of jumpstart or remove and then reinoculate makes sense, but that should be a short term um, proposition, and it should be based on some sort of research or data, not just which probiotic at Walmart is on sale, because you're not going to know which strains you need, which strains will cause overgrowth, which strains are more common. And you on your own are not likely to know when you should be clearing things out, when you should be adding things in, and when you are good to do it, stop, so that it's just naturally happening from diet, lifestyle, and environment. Like those are pretty specific or tricky things to figure out on your own.
right,
And it's certainly not on the directions of any probiotics you can just go buy.
right. And that's another thing with like tests. A lot of say functional practitioners, or more holistic type doctors, even though they're doing a natural approach, a lot of times they do testing. You hear the test don't guess slogan, that kind of thing. But the
Yeah.
testing will tell you which infections you have, specifically if you do have an overgrowth of a certain parasite, things like that, which helps the practitioner to determine maybe exactly what you should take in the short term, like Jenny's saying, but it still will not resolve and restore your health. It will resolve, but it won't maintain that. Like Jenny said, in a couple of weeks, it might come back. Well, you have to also always remember to take away what caused all of that in the first place, what caused those infections. If you're truly going to restore your health and then prevent, which I think is all of our ultimate goal.
Right.
So anyway, I think that's it. we were kind of rambling because it's just a huge topic just because
and it gets a little technical sometimes. So I think that's why we have so many analogies or whatever we want to call them.
So basically take stock of your physical symptoms.
Yes.
Find somebody really good to work with who does a holistic approach like we do. And and just do all the things, but do it now so that your immune system is strong and you're as healthy as possible.
Yes. So it's definitely foundational because it touches everything in your body, all those systems. And if you want foundational wellness lifelong, you've got to work on the foundations. You've got to commit to them.
Right. And just remember that if you have any symptoms of any kind, then it means you have a gut issue.
And inflammation.
So hopefully this was helpful.
Yes.
And if, as always, if you have any questions, reach out. And I think that's it.
Yes. We had a couple of people watching. No one asked any questions. Again, if you're watching this on the replay in the private group, we will answer there. If you're watching this on one of the streaming platforms or podcast platforms, if you're listening and you didn't see our weird lighting today, feel free to reach out, find out more about our programs, ask questions, share, all those things. Yes. And we will see you next week.
Have a good day.